Nubian civilization preceded and might even have given birth to that of Egypt. This is quite logical if one considers the likelihood that the Nile Valley was peopled by progressive descent of the black peoples from the region of the Great Lakes, the cradle of Homo sapiens. But conclusive archaeological facts that demonstrate this hypothesis were missing. The gap, it seems, has been filled thanks to the excavations of Keith Steele at the University of Chicago, conducted at the Coastal Cemetery in Nubia under the auspices of UNESCO's international campaign in 1963-64, before the construction of the Aswan Dam and flooding of the region by filling the reservoir. The cemetery in question is of Group A, a Nubian culture contemporaneous with the recent pre-dynastic period. It was called Cemetery L23 and L24. The special form contained very rich material now conserved at the Oriental Institute of the University of Chicago. So that's from day out. So reflecting on new evidence that demonstrates that Nubia was, in fact, the progenitor that brought about Egypt. And then we'll look at, in Afrocentricity, the kind of definition of Afrocentricity from Malefic Sante, and we sort of see what the purpose of it was. This is Afrocentricity is a mode of thought and action in which the centrality of African interests, values, and perspectives predominate. In regards to theory, it is the placing of African people in the center of an analysis of African phenomena. Thus, it is possible for anyone to master the discipline of seeking the location of Africans in a given phenomenon in terms of action and behavior. It is a devotion to the idea that what is in the best interest of African consciousness is at the heart of ethnic behavior. Finally, Afrocentricity seeks to enshrine the idea that blackness itself is a trope of ethics. Thus, to be black is to be against all forms of oppression, racism, classism, homophobia, patriarchy, child abuse, pedophilia, and white racial domination. And so you can see, well, why would somebody like San Ra kind of adopt this sort of persona, this identity of a person who is sort of not of this world? And you have to take into account the fact that San Ra, who was a homeboy of mine, born in Birmingham, Alabama, where I was born, and born in 1914 when he was born and lived through the experiences he had. I mean, given the fact that, as David Walker outlines in his reasons for the wretched condition of black people, that all of those things from, as he says, our wretchedness in consequence of slavery, our wretchedness in consequence of ignorance, our wretchedness in consequence of the preachings of the religion of Jesus Christ, and our wretchedness in consequence of the colonizing plan, that all of that being freed from all of those sort of overarching sort of oppressive sort of ideas and regimes would sort of generate that kind of liberation philosophy in just about anybody. Now let me go to my slides, and I put some in another part of the visionary sort of tradition. And proceed from there to looking at what I think are sort of contemporary manifestations of this idea in a kind of pop culture form. This is not going to be a smooth pretty paper, so give me no. Now this is, most people are familiar, I'm sure, with James Hampton's from the third millennium Christ. So it's a Revelations design installation that's supposed to be the seat of Christ's power when he comes back to this world. And I think the reason why I start with this, because in this sort of visionary tradition, I mean, you can see even in the kind of material and the kind of shimmer and the kind of shine of a work like this, you can see a little bit of where some of Sun Ra's sort of aesthetic sort of has in space. Now this was being done sort of contemporaneous to Sun Ra's transformation from a normal human, a mortal, to a man from Saturn. So this work was being worked on in secret in 1950s. It didn't get discovered until after Hampton died in the 1960s. And so you can see that there are parallels between what Hampton was doing and what Sun Ra was doing, not only in the kind of in the appearance of things and the kind of aesthetic of shine and of light, but also I think in the kind of visionary sort of messianic kind of approach to it also. If you look at Sun Ra's writings and you look at Hampton's writings, which have never been translated. Now Hampton created a language of his own. This is a completely encoded sort of text that has never been deciphered. But you can see that it hangs very clearly on readings of the Book of Revelation, reading of the King James Bible. And if you're listening to and reading some of Sun Ra's writings, and even if you listen to David Walker's appeal, even as he's challenging the kind of hypocrisy of Christianity, he still his appeal to black people in terms of liberation philosophy is still rooted in a reading of the Bible. And so it's a mystery to us all what this means. And I'm waiting for somebody to figure out a way to break the code, or at least make up something that would sound to go along with it, which probably was not wrong with it. So I moved from there to a couple of pop culture manifestations of things, and I think this is a figurine, and this is a part of my collection. I collect a lot of black figurines. I collect black comics too, and this is through various phases of American pop culture. There have been attempts, almost all of which have been failed attempts, to try and develop a line of toys that could be available to black children so that you would not have to be trapped in a cycle of always referring to the white representation as the representation of heroism and power. And this, the company that produced this was Old Man. And they had a series of characters, all of which were characters of color. And they all have some superpower that allows them in particular to resist and then to overthrow the kind of system of white supremacy and the system of white dominance. So this sort of fits very neatly into, I should have Frances Cress's book, The ISIS Cable, with me, because Frances Cress developed, the book is based on the theory she developed called the theory of color confrontation, which essentially says that the absence of melanin in the quantities that make people black had a psychological effect on white people, which preconditioned them to animosity towards people who had melanin. And so Sun Man, if you read the legend behind Sun Man, one of his powers is the fact that his skin is so melanin rich that it cannot be ripped, it cannot be torn, it cannot be cut, it cannot be burned, and it cannot be ripped off.